Choose your home or your husband. That was the ultimatum my mother-in-law gave me. When she tried to force me to sign over my house to my brother-in-law, I signed divorce papers instead. What would you do if your husband's entire family cornered you, demanding you hand over the one thing your parents had worked their whole lives to leave you? For me, 3 years of devotion as a daughter-in-law evaporated in a single, unannounced trial held in my own living room. They didn't ask if I was tired. They didn't care what I thought. They just looked at me like a walking ATM. The deepest cut was when I looked to my husband, hoping for a shred of protection, and he just lowered his head, avoiding my eyes, leaving me to be backed into a corner. It turned out that all this time, my dignity was just another asset for them to trade. But they were wrong. They thought because I was quiet, I was weak and easily led. No. The moment they laid a hand on the last legacy of my parents, I understood that the only thing that could save me was the power to say one word: no. And from that single shake of my head, a war for justice and self-respect officially began. Do you want to see how I made the greedy pay a steep price? My story starts here. If there was ever a moment in my life that made me understand that my patience over the last 3 years was a gift given to the wrong people, it was that evening. An evening that began as peacefully as any other, but in a few short seconds, it morphed into a sentencing, and I didn't even know I was the defendant. The dinner table was set. A roast chicken, golden and steaming, sat next to a bowl of creamy mashed potatoes. I sat down, my only wish for the meal to pass quietly. But my wishes were always pitifully small in this house. My mother-in-law, Brenda, didn't wait for anyone to take the first bite. She pulled out a thick manila folder and slapped it down on the table. The sharp, dry sound made me jump. The gravy in its boat trembled, sloshing against the sides. Take a look, Ava. The house your parents left you. It's time to sign the title over to Leo. I looked up. In that instant, I didn't know if I was frozen from shock or from pain. Leo, my 5-year-old brother-in-law, who couldn't hold a job for more than a few months, had been dating a girl named Mia from the nail salon for just 6 months. And now, the house my parents had scrimped and saved their entire lives for was being laid on the table like a party favor for their wedding. I glanced at my husband, David. He kept his head down, the fork in his hand trembling slightly. I prayed he would look up, say something, anything, in my defense. Instead, he just shot me a quick, weary look. Just sign it, Ava. Mom's right. It's a big house. It'll give the kids a good start. I heard every word, spoken so casually, so indifferently, yet each one felt like a blade twisting in my gut. I let out a laugh, a dry, hollow sound that scared even me. And what am I in this family? David? Am I your wife? Or just a bank account that magically refills itself? Leo immediately slammed his fist on the table, his chair scraping loudly as he pushed back. His voice was a low, irritated growl. What's that supposed to mean? You married into this family, so your house became my brother's house. Signing it over to me is the right thing to do. What will people think when I get married and don't have a place of my own? I turned to him, my gaze so calm it surprised me. It was as if I were a spectator to my own life. Since when did it become the sister-in-law's duty to fund her brother-in-law's wedding dreams, Leo? The air grew thick. My mother-in-law lifted her chin, her voice as cold as a Chicago wind. If you don't want to sign, just say so. But if that's your choice, we can get a divorce tonight. I'm not keeping a daughter-in-law like you. I couldn't hear anything else. My ears were ringing, whether from rage or a sudden, shocking clarity. I didn't know. I looked around the table at each face. My mother-in-law, her eyes seeing me as nothing but an obstacle. Leo, scowling like a man who'd been robbed of his birthright. And my husband, his head bowed, avoiding everything, as if he were a stranger at this table. In that moment, I understood. I never had a family here. I was just a shield they had propped up to hide their own schemes. And tonight, they had decided to throw it away. I set my fork down. My hands had stopped shaking. You want me to choose, don't you, Brenda? Fine. I'll choose. The table fell silent. I looked each of them directly in the eye and enunciated every word. I choose a divorce. My husband's head snapped up, his face pale. Leo was frozen in place. My mother-in-law's eyes widened in disbelief. But for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. It was as if, for the past 3 years, this was the first honest sentence I had ever spoken to myself. I stood up. Before anyone could react, I delivered my final line. My voice so quiet I was surprised I could be this calm. I will not sell my dignity for anyone's approval. The room plunged into silence. Not the comfortable silence of a half-eaten dinner, but the heavy, charged silence before a storm breaks. I knew that if one person spoke, everything would explode. But what they didn't know was that I had already exploded long ago. Today, I just no longer had the desire to pick up my own broken pieces. I would leave them there as a reminder that I had endured enough. As I walked away from the table, I heard my mother-in-law screaming behind me. But for the first time in 3 years of living in this house, I didn't turn back. Because I knew the moment I chose divorce was the moment I chose myself. After dropping the word divorce into the chaos of that dinner, I walked into my room, my hands ice cold. The moment the door clicked shut, it was as if all the sound from the outside world had been muted. In that suffocating silence, my mind began to play back the old films, scene by scene. So vivid I could almost smell the flowers from my wedding day, feel the firm grip of someone's hand in mine. The day I married into the family. The San Diego sun was a gentle, golden hue. My parents stood at the gate of my new home, their eyes misty, but their smiles wide, urging me to go inside. When Brenda, my mother-in-law, opened the door, her face was beaming, her voice sweeter than a freshly baked apple pie. "Ava, you're here. Come in, come in. Having you here will make this house so much brighter." Hearing that, my heart felt light. Who wouldn't want to be welcomed with such warmth? She took my hand, leading me inside, patting it gently like we were long-lost relatives. "You look so sweet. I bet you're a hard worker. Don't you worry. No one in this house will give you a hard time." Her words moved me to tears. If only I had known that was just the glossy wrapping paper, I would have held my heart back, not given it away so quickly. My husband, David, was so attentive back then, I believed I was the luckiest woman alive. He helped with my train, carried every bag, and constantly turned back to ask if I was tired. I remember when we were finally alone in our room. He hugged me from behind and whispered, "Now that you're here, I'll love you twice as much to make up for all the time we were apart." I believed him completely, without a shred of doubt. If anyone had told me then that the road ahead was paved with thorns, I would have laughed at their pessimism. And Leo, my brother-in-law, he was the one who made me think I had truly found a decent, considerate family. He ran out with a bright smile to help with the bags. "Let me get that, Ava. You just moved in. You shouldn't be working so hard." I was touched. A family like this, an environment like this, who wouldn't think they had found the right place to build a future? But the most idyllic happiness is always the most fragile, and the seeds of injustice never sprout with a loud bang. They grow from quiet little phrases, like pebbles dropped into still water, sending ripples all the way to the bottom. The first morning after the wedding, I woke up early to make breakfast. When my mother-in-law came into the kitchen, she looked surprised, then smiled. A modern daughter-in-law who knows how to wake up early and cook. That's great. But there are a lot of us here. From now on, you can handle the kitchen, Ava. I'm getting old. I nodded immediately, happy to do it. At the time, I thought cooking was no big deal. But 3 days later, as I was washing dishes, she stood beside me, her voice soft but sharp. "A daughter-in-law has to know how to sacrifice. The happiness of this house depends on you." I paused for a second. Sacrifice. The word had crossed my mind, but I never expected it to be deployed so soon. She said it so naturally, as if it were a universal truth that every woman who married had to accept. I remember that evening. As we started dinner, my mother-in-law cleared her throat. "The more people, the merrier. But more people means higher bills. Starting this month, Ava, just transfer the money for utilities to my account to keep things simple." David, sitting next to me, said nothing, just continued eating his chicken as if the conversation had nothing to do with him. Leo even chimed in. "Yeah, you just got here. You don't know. The electric bill used to be crazy high." I smiled and agreed, thinking it was a normal request. But after I transferred the money, Brenda sent me a text that gnawed at me for a long time. "You're a smart girl. You know how to take care of things. This family is counting on you. Counting on you." Those words started to haunt me. But back then, because I loved my husband and wanted a peaceful family, I told myself it was a small thing, not to let it bother me. A month later, Leo's sense of entitlement started to show. "Hey, Ava, I'm a little short. Can I borrow a couple hundred? I'll pay you back tomorrow." I gave it to him. A week passed. No repayment. I gently reminded him. He just laughed it off. "Sorry, my friend hasn't paid me back yet. I'll have it in a couple of days." I didn't press him. But a couple of days turned into a couple of weeks, then a couple of months. It was then I realized I might have stepped into a family that was better at taking than giving. One afternoon, as I was hanging laundry in the backyard, I heard my mother-in-law on the patio, talking to our neighbor, Mrs. Gable. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. They were just talking loudly. Having Ava is a blessing, Marge. She makes good money and knows her place. I have to keep a tight rein on her. If she gets away, we lose everything. I froze. Keep a tight rein on her. Like I was what? A tool? A source of income? Those words planted themselves in my heart and took root that day. I knew something was wrong, but I tried to deny it, telling myself that people say silly things when chatting with neighbors. I soothed myself with familiar excuses. She cares about me. That's why she said that. Leo is my brother-in-law. Helping him is normal. David is a quiet man. He doesn't like to get involved in family drama. But those words only pulled me deeper into the illusion that I could harmonize everything. I thought if I was just a little better, a little more patient, everyone would eventually see my good intentions. But the more I look back, the clearer I see the red flags I deliberately ignored. It's as if fate had warned me repeatedly that the seeds of conflict were sprouting in every casual remark, every glance, every action. I was just the only one who refused to see it. And that stubbornness led me to this day. A day where they could push me against a wall during dinner, forcing me to choose between my self-respect and a marriage devoid of warmth. If I had understood sooner, perhaps I wouldn't have let myself drift so far into a beautiful dream woven by others. But thanks to these memories, I finally saw the truth I had missed for 3 years. The truth that from the very first day I stepped into this house, I never truly belonged. Looking back at my 3 years in this house, I realized that each member of this family was like a pre-cut puzzle piece. When assembled, they formed a distorted picture that I had desperately tried to see as straight. If I had seen their true nature on day one, I would have run for the hills. But people are skilled at hiding their intentions, and I was far too trusting. My mother-in-law, Brenda, was the one who showed her colors most clearly. In public, she was all smiles and sweet talk, always bragging about her wonderful daughter-in-law who had a successful online business and knew how to run a household. But the moment we were behind closed doors, it was like she changed the channel. One afternoon, I was carrying a laundry basket through the living room and heard her booming voice. She was on the phone with a relative from back east. "Oh, Ava is a great girl. She gives me money every month to help with the bills. This house is so much better off thanks to her." I heard it and felt a mix of pride and unease. But her next sentence made my heart sink. Her husband is a sweetheart, but he doesn't make much. Without Ava, his mother, and I would be eating air. I stood there, stunned. She didn't say it with gratitude. She said it as if it were my natural-born duty. Then, when she hung up and saw me, her tone shifted instantly. "Ava, remember to pay the internet bill this afternoon. That's your responsibility." I just nodded, a dull ache spreading through my chest. My husband, David, was the source of my quietest, deepest disappointment. He was gentle, yes, but his gentleness was like a damp cloth, absorbing all the pressure his mother applied and then wringing it all out onto me. One evening, I said to him, "David, I paid the deposit for your dad's hospital stay last week. Can you transfer me your half when you get a chance?" David didn't look at me, his thumb still scrolling on his phone. "Yeah, I'll get to it when I have time. Why are you being so nitpicky about money between us?" That seemingly harmless question made me freeze. I went out to the porch for some air. Just as I put my hand on the door, I heard his mother whisper to him, "Son, watch out. Don't let Ava handle too much of the money. She's too calculated. Before you know it, she'll be demanding you split everything down to the last penny." David's only reply was a soft, "Aha." He didn't defend me. He never defended me. For him, the safest place was always by his mother's side. As for Leo, my brother-in-law, he was the type whose true colors revealed themselves after just a short time. The polite act from day one faded quickly. One evening, I had just gotten home from a long day of packing orders. Before I could even have a glass of water, Leo blocked my path. "Ava, can I borrow $1,000? I'm investing with a friend to open a food truck." I was taken aback. "Another one? Did you discuss this with the family first?" Leo's face soured. "Why are you so uptight? You make good money. Just lend it to me. Think of it as an investment in my future." I looked at him. The word future sounded so bitter coming from his lips. I told him straight, "With that attitude, I can't lend you the money." Leo shot me a sharp, venomous look. You're my sister-in-law. You're supposed to take care of me. You married David, so this house and everything in it belongs to us anyway. What are you holding on to it for? I was speechless. That time, I refused, and from that day on, he made his resentment toward me clear. Then there was Mia, Leo's girlfriend. A petite girl with a soft voice, but her eyes were anything but. The first time she met me, she looked around the house and asked, as if it were a casual thought, Ava, this place must be worth at least 700 grand, right? It's so beautiful. It'd be great to have a place like this waiting for you after the wedding. I forced a smile. This house was a gift from my parents. It's not my husband's family's property. Mia just smirked, her lips curling slightly. Oh, really? But once you're married, it all becomes one big family pot, right? I didn't answer. I knew exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. She looked at me with the same calculating gaze one uses to appraise an item they plan to acquire. The only person in the neighborhood who made me feel like I wasn't going crazy was Mrs. Gable from next door. One afternoon, while I was taking out the trash, she pulled me aside. Ava, listen to me. Be careful. Your in-laws are not as sweet as you think. I heard your mother-in-law talking to Betty from down the street the other day. She said she has to hold on to you so she doesn't lose the house. My eyes widened. Are you sure you heard that right, Mrs. Gable? She shook her head. I'm old, honey, but my hearing is fine. They're planning something. Don't let them push you around until you can't get back up. Her words sent a chill down my spine. But when I got home and everyone was acting normal, I convinced myself she must have misheard. But reality is never mistaken. One evening, Brenda said in front of the whole family, Ava is capable. She can take care of this house. A sister-in-law who doesn't think about her brother-in-law. Who will? Helping Leo get married is a shared responsibility. Her words hung in the air like the cold clang of metal on concrete. No one objected, not even David. I looked at each of them, and for the first time, I saw the truth I had been avoiding for so long. In this family, everyone had a role to play. I was the only one who was genuine, and in that moment, I understood that the storm that broke at dinner wasn't random. It was the culmination of every word, every look, every time I was treated like a walking wallet. The collapse of a marriage never starts with a big explosion. It begins with tiny cracks that everyone assumes will heal themselves, until one day, the whole structure comes crashing down, never to be rebuilt. In the days that followed, even as I tried to live peacefully, the tension in the house was like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point, just waiting for someone to let go so it could snap back and hit me in the face. The conflict didn't erupt in loud arguments. It came in a steady drip of passive-aggressive remarks, enough to erode anyone's patience. Except mine, because I still believed that a little endurance would bring peace. What surprised me most was Brenda. She could switch from gentle to thorny in a single sentence. One morning, as I was making coffee before opening my laptop to check inventory, she stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, observing me like an old appliance that was starting to wear out. Ava, it's a little strange for a woman to be married for 3 years and not have children. Other families are full of grandkids. Our house is so empty. My hand paused, the coffee mug trembling slightly. I forced a smile, keeping my voice as steady as I could. Mom, these things happen when they're meant to. We can't force it. She gave me a sideways glance. Meant to happen? A young woman gets married. She needs to think about her duties. If you can't have children, then you're... She let the sentence hang. But I knew what she meant. My heart twisted. What hurt even more was the secret I had been keeping for years. The doctor had told us the issue was with David, but he had forbidden me from telling anyone. If you tell a soul, Ava, I'll consider us done. So, I kept silent, bearing the blame for our childlessness. That day, as I went upstairs, I heard her telling someone downstairs, what a useless daughter-in-law. Can't have kids, has no sense, can't even manage money properly. This house has been nothing but chaos since she arrived. I bit my lip and kept walking, not wanting to hear more, but every word she spoke was like a thorn in my ear. Soon after, our expenses became another excuse for her to criticize me. One day, she shoved the water bill into my hand. Ava, the bill is over $200 this month. There are only 4 people in this house. What are you all doing? You need to watch how much you're showering. Don't be so wasteful. I looked at the bill and tried to explain. Mom, Leo has been home all day and his friends come over. They must be using more water. She waved my explanation away. Excuses. When there's a daughter-in-law in the house, she should be managing these things, not leaving it for an old woman like me. I wanted to ask if she considered the utility money I transferred to her account every month as me managing things, but I held back. Any defense would only make me more guilty in her eyes. And Leo, well, he was a lost cause. He borrowed money like he drank water quickly and without a trace. One afternoon, after 3 months of waiting, I gently asked him, Leo, about that money you borrowed. I needed to restock my inventory. He was playing a video game, his eyes glued to the screen. I remember. I'll get it to you when I have it. Why are you so uptight? Who can stand a sister-in-law who's such a penny pincher? I took a deep breath. It's not about being a penny pincher. Leo, I have a business to run. I need the capital. He paused the game and turned to me, a smirk on his face. You should check yourself. That big house is in your name. You're not hurting for cash. You act like lending me a few bucks is going to bankrupt you. His words were a punch to the gut. He mentioned my parents' house with an air of entitlement, as if he had a natural right to it. Then, there was Mia. Every time she came over, I felt like I was an exhibit being scrutinized. One time, Brenda asked me to bring another chair into the living room for her. As I set it down, Mia looked around and asked, Ava, is this house really in your name? I nodded. Yes. My parents left it to me. Mia's lips curled, her eyes glinting with a calculated gleam. No wonder it's so nice. It's a relief to have a place to live after getting married. But are you planning to leave it like that? Or are you going to transfer the title to your husband's family? I felt a chill. Why do you ask? Mia smiled sweetly, but it made my blood run cold. Well, I heard Leo say that it's a bit awkward to live in a house that's in someone else's name. If you care about him and me, you'd help us out, right? I was speechless. Who said I cared about you? Mia didn't argue, just shrugged, but her eyes clearly said, You'll have to care, because you're in this family now. And so it went. Every little comment, every side eye, every insinuation added up, creating a constant, low-level pain. Every day brought a new cut, something to weigh down my spirit. But I kept enduring, telling myself to ignore it, not to react, anything to keep the peace. One afternoon, Mrs. Gable stopped by. The moment she saw me, she pulled me aside and whispered, Ava, I overheard them talking about taking your house. Be careful, honey. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. I was startled. What? How do you know? She shook her head, her eyes uncharacteristically serious. This neighborhood has thin walls. Your mother-in-law and that girl Mia were talking loudly. They have big plans. Don't let them corner you. I felt a wave of dread. It wasn't just my imagination. But when I mentioned it to David, he just waved his hand dismissively. Mrs. Gable is a gossip, Ava. You can't believe everything she says. Just try to keep the peace and stop listening to rumors. Peace. The word felt so impossibly distant. But I still tried. I told myself every family has friction. If I just gave in a little, they would eventually appreciate me. But I was wrong. So wrong that I failed to see that the look in my mother-in-law's eyes was never that of a family member. It was the look one gives an object of value to be used until it's worthless, then discarded. One evening, Brenda sat on the sofa, looking me up and down, and said something I'll never forget. Ava, you're a smart girl. If you take care of this family, helping Leo get married will be easy. Having your property is a blessing for us. Don't make me say it again. At that moment, a vague sense of terror crept into my heart. In their eyes, my ability to earn money wasn't something to be respected. It was an excuse to pile more burdens on my shoulders. They saw my efforts as their due, my assets as their own. And all this time, I thought I was really one of them. That night, I lay in bed, my eyes wide open in the darkness. Nothing major had happened yet, but the accumulation of small incidents was like a steady stream of pebbles dropping into the pond of my soul, keeping the surface in constant turmoil. I didn't know it was just the beginning, but I knew one thing for sure. People's true natures aren't that hard to see. It was I who had chosen to keep my eyes shut, and it was these small things, bit by bit, that pushed me toward that fateful dinner, where everything would detonate, and no one would hide their true self any longer. I started to feel a distinct shift in the family's atmosphere. It was as if they were all preparing for a plan that I was the last to know about. My mother-in-law's hostility was no longer just a few snide remarks. It became a series of calculated actions, But it wasn't until the events of that weekend that I truly understood I had been pushed outside the family circle long ago. It was a Saturday. I had the day off and planned to organize my inventory and go over the month's accounts. Weekends were usually noisy, with Leo and his friends hanging around. But that morning, the house was eerily silent. My mother-in-law's car was gone. So was David's, and even Leo's beat-up old Honda was nowhere in sight. I called David first. "Hey, where are you?" His voice on the other end was faint, as if he were hiding something. "I'm out with Mom. I'll tell you later." "Out where? Why is no one home?" I pressed. He hesitated for a few seconds. "I'm busy. We'll talk when I get back." He hung up before I could ask another question. A sense of foreboding settled over me. I couldn't sit still, but I tried to focus on my work. Around noon, while I was arranging products on a shelf, I received a text from an unknown number, but the tone was chillingly familiar. "Hey Ava, we're looking at a house. Leo told me to let you know." It was Mia. I read the message over and over in silence, my heart pounding in my chest. I called her back immediately. "Mia, what are you talking about? What house?" Her voice was nonchalant. "Oh, we're house hunting for the wedding. Brenda and David are here too. You should come check it out if you're free." My stomach dropped. I gritted my teeth. "Who said I had to go house hunting for your wedding?" Mia laughed softly, a sound that felt like a mockery. "Well, you're part of the family, aren't you? A house is a big deal. Brenda says it's much faster to get married if there's a house ready and waiting." I hung up. Leo's wedding, their house, Mia's future as a daughter-in-law, all of it was being decided without me. Not a single question, not one conversation. What had I been in this house for the past 3 years? I stood still for a long time before I could compose myself enough to drive to the address Mia had sent. It was a small, single-story house in a wide alley, much older and smaller than the house in my name. Before I could even step inside, I heard my mother-in-law's voice. "Mia, this place is okay. But if you become Ava's sister-in-law, living in her house would be so much better. It's spacious, and it's right there. It would be so convenient for you too." I stopped dead in the doorway. Her words were like a bucket of ice water thrown in my face. Mia's voice was quiet, but loud enough for me to hear. "But Brenda, if the house is in Ava's name, it would be a little awkward for us. We're newlyweds. What if something happens down the line? We wouldn't have a leg to stand on." Brenda nodded, as if Mia had said exactly what she wanted to hear. "Ava is a grown woman. She needs to know how to sacrifice. Letting her brother-in-law live there would be a blessing for her too." I stepped inside, my voice no longer calm. "Sacrifice what? Why didn't you discuss any of this with me?" All three of them turned around. David looked at me like I was an intruder. My mother-in-law frowned in annoyance, and Mia flashed a fake smile. "Oh, you're here. I thought you were busy. We were just brainstorming." I looked directly at my mother-in-law. "Mom, I don't understand what's happening. Why wouldn't you say a word to me about something so important?" Brenda crossed her arms, her chin held high in a position of power. "Because you're always busy. Besides, a house is a family matter. You're the daughter-in-law. You have to provide for this family. Your house is the biggest. It makes sense for the kids to live there." I burst out laughing, a laugh more bitter than medicine. "But that house belongs to me. My parents gave it to me. It's not this family's property. How could you just decide that?" David cut in, his tone cold, as if I were being unreasonable. "Ava, that's not a nice way to put it. Your parents gave it to you, but they also gave it to this family. If you keep hoarding it, people will judge you." I turned to him. The look in his eyes told me everything. He was not on my side. He had never been on my side. The final blow came from Mia. She tilted her head, her voice soft as silk but sharp as a razor. "Ava, you're the older sister-in-law. If you care about Leo, you want to help us have a stable home. It would be embarrassing for us to be renting as a newly married couple." I looked at Mia, then at Leo, then at David, and finally at Brenda. All the pieces fit together with terrifying perfection. Nothing was a coincidence. It was all a plan. From Mia's subtle hints, to Leo's constant borrowing, to Brenda testing my reactions, to David's silence, it was all designed to push me into the corner they wanted me in. I took a deep breath to keep from crying. "If you've all made up your minds, why even bother asking me?" Brenda replied instantly. "What's there to ask? All you need to do is sign. It's just one signature." She said it so casually, like swiping a credit card to buy groceries. I looked at David one last time. He avoided my gaze. He was afraid to see the disappointment I had for him, but he still wouldn't stand with me. In that moment, I knew. It wasn't that my patience had run out. It was that they had wanted me out of their family portrait for a long time. They were just waiting for the right moment to peel me away from their lives like an expired sticker. And that day had come sooner than I thought. That evening, after returning from the house viewing, I sat alone in my room, the door closed but not locked. For some reason, I felt trapped in an invisible box, the air growing thinner with every breath. The day's events played back in my mind like a series of slaps, one after another, enough to wake anyone up. Anyone except the me of a few years ago. I looked around the room. Everything in it, from the dresser to the mirror, I had helped pay for. When we first got married, I had a simple mindset. A husband and wife build their life together. I never imagined that I would end up building it alone, for everyone except myself. I thought back over the past 3 years. The utility bills started small, a few $100s, but soon the house was lit up like it was open 24/7. I transferred the money every month, never a day late. Each time, Brenda would offer a lukewarm comment. A good daughter-in-law knows her place. This family is better off with you. Better off how? No one ever specified, but the responsibility was implicitly mine. The medical bills. Last year, Brenda was hospitalized for stomach ulcers. I handled everything. David just stood by, holding my purse, and said, "You're getting used to this. There will be plenty more family matters to handle in the future." When was it my job to get used to paying my mother-in-law's medical bills? I didn't know. Leo's debts. My lazy brother-in-law, who dreamed of others making him rich. He owed money to friends, had credit card debt, unpaid phone bills. Every time he came to me, his hands outstretched like a child. "Ava, help me out one last time. I swear, this is the last time." But his last time was longer than the Coronado Bridge. The birthday parties for Leo, for Mia, for Brenda, for their friends. No one ever reached for their wallet. Every time I paid, they looked at me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. David's car repairs. Every time his car broke down, he wouldn't take it to the shop. He'd just present the problem to me, as if I were a bottomless charity fund. I'd give him the money, and he wouldn't say thank you. Just, "You're good at making money. Helping your husband out a little is no big deal." I couldn't count the number of times I had to tell myself not to be upset, not to hold a grudge. But the more I tolerated, the more they took. And the biggest mirror reflecting this injustice was the constant mockery about my childlessness. One time at dinner, Brenda looked at me and said to no one in particular, "What kind of woman can't get pregnant after 3 years? If you can't have children, you need to get yourself checked out. This family can't wait forever." David heard it all and calmly continued eating, never explaining, even though he knew the problem was his. I silently accepted the blame for him, but every time I heard the words, "can't have children," my heart ached as if a piece of it were being torn away. I vividly remember one night. Around 1 a.m., I woke up and went downstairs for a glass of water. As I reached the stairs, I heard Brenda's voice from the patio. She was talking with Mrs. Gable. I stood behind the door, not daring to breathe. My mother-in-law said, "We have to keep a tight rein on Ava. If she leaves, the money source is gone. Leo isn't settled yet. If Ava leaves, this family collapses." I was frozen. I don't know how long I stood there, tears streaming down my face. I understood then. I wasn't a daughter-in-law, not family, not a member of this household. I was a steady source of income, a financial safety net, a house they wanted to seize. The next morning, Brenda smiled at me as usual, calling my name sweetly, which only made the love I had for them feel like a cruel joke. These memories flooded my mind like a raging river. The pain wasn't from the mistreatment itself, but from my own failure to see the truth sooner. I asked myself why I had clung so desperately to this so-called family when they never considered me a part of it. I sat up and wiped my tears. A thought emerged, clear and cold. If they saw me as a tool, then I had to learn how to escape the hands that controlled me. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I saw them all with sober eyes, no longer the gentle, easily led daughter-in-law. And from that moment, I knew my life was about to turn a new page, a painful but bright one, where I would no longer play the victim. I began to understand that I hadn't changed. My eyes had just opened. And once you're awake, no one can fool you again. That evening, the air in San Diego was unusually humid and heavy, not because of the weather, but because a fire had been smoldering inside me all afternoon, waiting for a single spark to engulf everything. I went downstairs when Brenda called for dinner, trying to act as normal as possible. But the moment I sat down, I knew this was no ordinary meal. In the middle of the table, right at my place setting, was that familiar manila folder. It lay there like a declaration of war. No one spoke for the first few seconds. Only the sound of a spoon clinking against a bowl, as dry as metal scraping on a wall. My mother-in-law broke the silence. She pushed the folder toward me, her eyes cold and calculating. "Ava, sign this. The house your parents left you. It's time to transfer the title to Leo. He's getting married soon. He needs a proper place to live." I looked at the folder, my heart as heavy as lead. I asked, my voice steady, "You want me to sign it over to Leo? Why wasn't this discussed with me first?" Brenda tossed her head back. "What's there to discuss? You're the daughter-in-law. When there's a family matter, you need to be considerate. Why would you and David need such a big house? It makes sense for the kids to live there." I opened my mouth to speak, but Leo cut me off, his voice cocky. "As the sister-in-law, you should be thinking of me. You don't even use all that space. It's more convenient for us to live there." I turned to him, and if I hadn't restrained myself, I would have burst into bitter laughter. Since when did my house, the house my parents poured their life savings into, become his default, right? I asked him directly. "What do you mean by that?" "That house was a gift to me from my parents. It's not this family's property." Leo shot up from his chair with a loud scrape. "But you married David, so you're one of us now. Your house is our house. Stop being so selfish." I felt my hands tremble, not from fear, but from rage. I was so angry I could feel my own heartbeat, heavy and suffocated. "David, say something." David kept his head down, meticulously picking at his food, as if this meal were more important than his wife. Finally, he sighed, his voice as bland as water. "Ava, just sign it and make Mom happy. And it helps your brother-in-law." I laughed, unable to hold it back this time. A short, sharp laugh that died in my throat, as cutting as a shard of glass. "Help? Help with what? My house, my parents' hard work, and you all talk about it like I'm just holding it for someone." My mother-in-law slammed her hand on the table. Not hard, but enough to startle everyone. "Is that how you talk to your mother-in-law? We all care about you in this house. You need to learn to sacrifice. Sign it, and this will all be over. If you don't..." She left the threat hanging, but everyone understood. Leo growled, "If you don't, you'd better watch yourself." The last straw. It never makes a loud noise. It's just a single drop, but it's enough to make the water overflow. In that moment, I felt myself reach my limit. I shot up from my seat, the chair hitting the floor with a sharp, cold sound. That house was a gift from my parents. No one has the right to force me to do anything with it. No one. The table froze. Brenda stared. David's face went pale, and Leo gritted his teeth. Mia, who had been clearing dishes, looked at me in shock, as if she couldn't believe the once docile daughter-in-law would dare to fight back. A few seconds of dead silence. The air in the room was thick enough to cut. Leo was the first to lose his composure. "Say that again. You married into this family, so you're obligated to use your assets to provide for this family. Who do you think you are?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm the only person in this house with any self-respect." My mother-in-law screamed. "Ava, you are being completely disrespectful." I turned to her, my voice surprisingly calm. "Brenda, for 3 years, I have had enough. I paid for the utilities, the medical bills, the groceries, the birthday parties, the debts. I endured you blaming me for not having children. I endured my brother-in-law treating me like an ATM. But my parents' house is off limits." Brenda's face flushed red, as if she'd been slapped. "So you're finally showing your true colors, are you?" David finally stood up and grabbed my arm, his voice urgent. "Lower your voice, Ava. You're making a scene." I pulled my arm away. "I'm not the one making a scene. All of you are, by demanding something that doesn't belong to you." That sentence was the final cut, severing the last thread connecting me to this family. I looked at each of them. For 3 years, I had tried to see them in the best possible light. But now, their true nature was on full display, greedy, selfish, and viewing me as nothing more than a tool. I took a deep breath and spoke my final words into the absolute tension. "If anyone tries to force me to sign this again, don't blame me for choosing a different path." The room fell silent as a tomb, and I knew, with absolute certainty, this war had only just begun. After my final words at that dinner, the atmosphere in the house became so thick it was hard to breathe. No one moved. No one even seemed to exhale. All eyes were on me, as if I had just lit the fuse to a bomb they had been assembling for years. Brenda was the first to lose control. She slammed her hand on the table so hard a glass of water jumped. Ava, you are so ungrateful. I've put up with you for 3 years, and now you dare talk back to me? I bit my tongue. Put up with me? I paid for everything. The utilities, the food, the medical bills. I even paid for her son's car repairs, everyone's birthday parties, and all of Leo's debts. If anyone was putting up with anyone, it was me putting up with this entire family. But I didn't say it out loud. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew the more I argued, the less they would respect me. Leo suddenly shot up and strode towards me. His face beat red. What kind of daughter-in-law are you? If you can't be considerate, then get out of this house. We don't want someone like you here. I laughed, a cold, sharp sound that made me feel like I had transformed into someone else entirely. On what grounds are you kicking me out, Leo? He got right in my face. On the grounds that you've lost all respect for everyone. You live in this house, but it's always my house, my money, my everything. Why did you even bother marrying into this family? His question wasn't a question. It was a direct assault on my dignity. I could feel my hands clenching into tight fists under the table. Before I could answer, Brenda jumped in, her voice shrill and grating. Just try leaving this house and see who'll take you. I've never seen a daughter-in-law as insolent as you. If any other family had someone like you, they would have thrown you out ages ago. I looked up at her. Her gaze was no longer that of an elder chiding a younger family member. It was the look of someone wanting to dispose of an expired product. In that moment, a quiet desperation welled up in my chest. Not because they were forcing me to sign, but because I had once considered them family, had given them my all, and now they were backing me into a corner without an ounce of mercy. David came to my side, taking my hand as if to calm the situation, but his words were another knife to the heart. Ava, stop making things difficult for everyone. Just sign it and it'll all be over. You're making such a big deal out of nothing. I looked at him and felt like I was seeing a stranger. The man who had stood with me at the altar and vowed to protect me for life was now telling me not to make things difficult for the very people who were crushing me. My voice cracked with anger. You think this is nothing? My house, my parents' legacy, and you all treat it like it's community property. You think signing it over to your brother is a small thing? David avoided my eyes. It's not like you're losing anything. Mom and I just want what's best for the family. I lowered my head and laughed. A bitter, sour sound. What's best for this family? And what about me? Am I not part of this family? Brenda roared. Don't you dare use that tone in my house. A disrespectful daughter-in-law is one I will throw out without a second thought. My heart pounded. That wasn't an empty threat made in anger. It was her true belief. She wanted me out. She wanted me to know my place was beneath them. Leo's voice was a low growl. If you don't sign, you're out of this house tonight. I looked at him coldly. It would be easy for me to leave. But if I go, Leo, who's going to pay off your debts every month? Leo's face went pale. Brenda shot him a dirty look before turning back to me. Don't you threaten us. If you don't sign, you'll regret it. David squeezed my hand tighter, his voice low but just as forceful. Ava, listen to me. Stop being so stubborn. Just one signature, and it's done. Mom's getting older. Don't upset her. I looked down at his hand gripping mine. The hand that once brought me so much comfort now felt suffocating. A painful truth echoed in my mind. They didn't need me. They needed my signature. They needed my assets. They needed my silence. The dinner had become a trial. 3 of them on one side, me on the other, the roles seemingly preassigned. I felt like the whole world was closing in on me, waiting for me to collapse. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. If you all want me to sign this so badly, let me ask one question. The room fell silent. I looked directly at David. Whose side are you on? The question froze the room. David opened his mouth, but no words came out. Brenda answered for him. He's on the side of this family, not on your side. My heart clenched, not because of what she said, but because David didn't deny it. He was silent. He accepted it. He was doing exactly what they wanted. In that moment, I knew I had lost this battle. I was surrounded. My defenses breached. I felt cornered, with no air to breathe. But there was one thing they didn't know. A woman pushed to the brink isn't weak. She's about to fight back with everything she has. They thought they had won. But in reality, this was only the beginning. After the tense dinner, I walked into my room, my legs feeling numb. But unlike before, this time I didn't cry. I wasn't shaking. I didn't feel so hurt that I wanted to run away. I just felt a strange, profound, calm composure I didn't know I possessed. Perhaps it was because I knew that nothing they were doing could touch what truly mattered anymore. I locked the door, turned on a small, warm lamp, and sat on the edge of the bed. The soft light made the room feel quiet and still, but my mind was racing, connecting every incident, every conversation, every look into a single, complete picture. And in that silence, I allowed myself to confront the secret I had been holding for the past month. A month ago, on a windy afternoon, my old college friend, Alex, now a lawyer, called me. His tone wasn't that of a friend catching up. It was serious. "Ava, are you sure you're okay in that house?" I gave a humorless laugh. "What part of this seems okay to you, Alex?" He was silent for a moment before saying something that stopped me cold. "If you feel pressured, cornered, or disrespected, don't just stand there and take it. In a marriage, a woman only truly loses when she doesn't have an exit strategy. You need to have an escape route for yourself." I remember asking him what he meant. Alex replied immediately, "If that house is in your name and you want to protect it, you need to act before things get worse. Protecting your assets is protecting your rights. Do you understand?" That day was the first time I had ever seriously considered the term exit strategy. And that same day, I met Alex at a title company. Within 2 hours, I had signed the paperwork. The house my parents had left me, the very house my in-laws were trying to seize, had been sold for a good price. The money was transferred directly into a private trust account, locked with a level of security only I and the bank could access. I remember Alex asking, "Are you sure you want to keep this a secret?" I nodded. "The longer I keep it quiet, the more leverage I have." I left his office that day feeling like I had just stepped out of a trap that had held me for 3 years. But I said nothing. I didn't want to tip anyone off. I held on to that secret like a final weapon, waiting for the right moment to use it. And tonight, as they all ganged up on me to sign the deed, I knew I had timed it perfectly. But that wasn't all. I stood up and opened a small drawer in my vanity. Inside was a USB drive that still made my heart ache, not from fear, but from pain. It was the proof of David's affair, proof I had painstakingly gathered over the past 2 months. I remember the day my suspicions started. I found the scent of a strange perfume on his shirt. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't a cologne he ever wore. I asked him gently, "Where were you?" He avoided my eyes. "Out for drinks with friends." But I knew he was lying. For the first time, my heart no longer trusted his words. I secretly checked his phone while he was asleep. The first conversation I read made my hands go cold. "Thanks for today. I miss you." The text was from an unsaved number, but the contact info was labeled Mystic Spa. I froze. Not Mia, my sister-in-law, but an employee at the spa Mia frequented. The subsequent messages were even more explicit. Scheduled meetings, words of longing, and even audio clips of them laughing in a coffee shop. I saved everything. Alex looked at me when I handed him the USB. "If you use this, Ava, there's no turning back." I smiled, a weak but determined smile. "I know, but I didn't want to use it yet. I wanted to wait. I wanted to see just how far they would push me. If they had treated me, even without love, as a daughter-in-law, I would have stayed silent. But they treated me as a tool, and for that, I would show no mercy. Tonight, they had made their choice. They had chosen to back me into a corner. I closed the drawer and leaned back against the headboard. The warm lamplight seemed to shrink the room, leaving only me and my spiraling thoughts. For 3 years, I had let them do as they pleased. I was patient. I was silent. I consoled myself. But I never truly fought back. They thought I was weak. They thought I didn't have the courage. They thought a little pressure would make me crumble. But they didn't know that the most deeply wounded woman is also the hardest to break. I clenched my fists. "Go ahead. Push me further. Keep backing me into that corner. The day I strike back will be the day they least expect it." And I've been ready for a month. The next morning, the air in the house was so heavy it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I hadn't even left my room when I heard the voices of Brenda, Leo, and David from the living room, sharp and strained. "Ava, get out here. We need to settle this today." I walked out. The three of them were standing in a line, as if waiting for a verdict. On the coffee table was the same folder from last night. I calmly walked to an armchair and sat down. Saying nothing, Brenda crossed her arms. "I'm overlooking your disrespect from last night. But today, I'm demanding you sign. If you don't blame me for what happens next." I looked at her for a long moment, long enough that she started to lose her patience. Just as she was about to speak again, I placed an envelope on the table. The sound of paper on wood echoed in the silent room. "This is my answer." Leo frowned, snatched the envelope, and tore it open. Inside was a notarized copy of a document. As he glanced at it, his face went white. "Mom, it can't be. The house is in someone else's name." Brenda grabbed the paper from him. She stared at it, her hands shaking as if she'd been plunged into icy water. "Ava, what is this?" I crossed my arms, my voice so calm it felt foreign even to me. "You're too late. I sold the house." The room erupted. David slammed his hand on the table, his face turning a furious shade of red. "Are you out of your mind, Ava? How dare you sell the house without asking me?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Ask you? Did you ask me when you and your mother decided to give it to your brother?" Leo screamed as if his birthright had been stolen. "You're a daughter-in-law. You have no right to sell it. That's our family's house." I replied coldly. "The person whose name is on the deed owns the property. The law doesn't recognize this family house you're talking about." Brenda staggered back a step, grabbing the table for support. "Ava, how could you do this? Are you betraying this family?" I tilted my head slightly, my voice as hard as steel. "No, I'm just protecting what's mine." David rushed toward me, practically shouting in my face. "What did you sell it for? To leave me?" I didn't answer. Instead, I took out my phone, placed it on the table, and pressed play. An audio recording filled the silent living room. It was Brenda's voice from that night on the patio. Every word a dagger. "We have to keep a tight rein on Ava. If she leaves, the money source is gone. We have to make her sign the house over to Leo. We can kick Ava out any time after that." I played the second recording. The voices of Leo, Mia, and David all mixed together from a conversation I overheard. "If Ava doesn't sign, we'll find a way to force her out. What does she need a house for anyway?" When the recording ended, a dead silence fell over the room. The kind of silence that comes when people have been exposed. Leo's face was ashen, and he stammered, You were eavesdropping." "I've lived in this house for 3 years," I said, not denying it. "If I didn't listen closely, how would I ever see your true selves?" Mia, who had been standing behind Leo, went pale. "Ava, we were just kidding." I laughed. "Kidding? Kidding about throwing me out of my own home? Kidding about seizing my property after you get married?" Brenda nearly collapsed into a chair, her hand shaking so violently the folder fell to the floor. "Ava, you're a monster." I walked over, bent down to pick up the folder, and placed it back in front of her. "I'm not a monster. I've just stopped letting other people abuse me." David pointed a trembling finger at me. "Ava, how could you betray my entire family like this?" I looked at him, not a trace of heartbreak left in my eyes. "Your family? Is this what you call a family? A family that schemes to steal my property? A family that lets their wife be insulted, pressured, and treated like an ATM?" David froze. I continued, "The house is sold. The money is untouchable. And I also have proof of your affair, David. I'll use it when I need to." He was stunned, his face as white as a sheet. "Ava, what are you saying?" "I know where you go at night," I said calmly, "and who you're with." His raised hand immediately dropped to his side. No one said another word. There were no more arguments to be made, no more lies to cover up. I stood tall, looking at the 3 people before me, the people who had caused me so much pain, who had pushed me to my breaking point. I spoke my final words, quiet but so sharp no one would ever forget them. "From this moment on, I am no longer a daughter-in-law you can push around. My name is Ava Miller, and I am in charge of my own life." In that instant, a shockwave went through the house, as if lightning had struck the roof, and in that same instant, the real war began. The living room that day was no longer a living room. It was a battlefield, and every person in it was shell-shocked and disoriented. Except for me. I was terrifyingly calm. The silence lasted less than a minute, but it was long enough for me to do what I had hesitated to do for 3 years. I opened my purse, took out a folded stack of papers, and placed them in the middle of the table. The sound was almost silent, but to them, it must have felt like a sledgehammer to the spine. Divorce papers, already signed. I pushed them toward David. When all of you pressured me, I knew there was nothing left to save. I'm saving myself now." My mother-in-law reacted as if she'd been electrocuted. She lunged forward, snatched the papers, and threw them on the floor. "No, I won't let you divorce him. What kind of cruel woman are you? To leave your husband when he's facing hardship, how will you ever show your face in public? Leo, his face purple with rage, stammered, Ava, what are you doing? If you get a divorce, what about the house? How am I supposed to marry Mia? I looked at him, my gaze devoid of its former tolerance. The house was sold a long time ago, Leo. As for Mia, that's your problem. My words hit him like a physical blow. He slammed his hand on the table, but it trembled, lacking any of its former confidence. The man who had demanded I leave yesterday was now terrified of losing his free ride. While the rest of them descended into chaos, David was the only one who remained silent. He stood frozen, his face gray as ash. Then, he did something I never expected. He knelt before me, his head bowed so low it was inches from my feet. Ava, don't do this. I'm begging you. We can fix this. I was wrong. Whatever you want. I'll change. I'll do anything. I looked down at him. The man who had promised to love and protect me was now on his knees. Not because he was afraid of losing his wife, but because he was afraid of losing his support system. He was afraid of losing my money, his reputation, the perfect family image he paraded around. I shook my head. You're not afraid of divorce because you love me, David. You're afraid of losing what I provide. He started to cry. That's not true. Ava, I cut him off. Don't? You know exactly what you've done. I turned toward the door. Just then, it opened, and everyone startled. My lawyer, Alex, stepped inside, dressed in a crisp white shirt, his expression sharp but polite. He surveyed the room and offered a calm greeting. Good morning. I'm here at Ava's request. My mother-in-law shrieked. Who let you in my house? We don't need a lawyer here. Alex simply smiled. You may not need me, ma'am, but Ava does. And today, we're going to discuss things according to the law. He placed his briefcase on the table, his composure unshakable. First, regarding the house you demanded Ava sign over. According to the notarized deed of sale from 1 month ago, Ava legally sold the property. The funds were deposited into a private trust. This asset is no longer up for discussion. Leo jumped to his feet. You're lying. Ava never said anything about this. Alex turned the file toward Leo. This is a copy of the closing statement. Feel free to review it. Leo flipped through a few pages and then sank back into his chair, as if all the air had been sucked out of him. Alex continued. Second, these are bank statements for David's accounts over the last 3 months, including regular transfers to an account under the name of a Miss Tiffany Crane. The transfers are consistent, $200 to $300 every week. The room imploded. David went pale, and Brenda looked like she was about to faint. Crane? Who is Tiffany Crane? Alex replied smoothly. She is not a relative. She is an employee at the Mystic Spa, according to the information Ava has provided. She is the person David has been meeting with regularly. David looked as if he'd been slapped. He shot to his feet. Ava, you spied on me. I met his gaze. No, I just stopped letting you fool me. Brenda wailed, on the verge of hysteria. No, I don't believe it. My son would never have an affair. You're slandering him. You're trying to destroy this family. Alex remained calm, his voice firm. I am not here to debate emotions. I am here to present facts. If the family requires further proof, I can provide video evidence, photographs, and credit card receipts from the spa. The room fell into absolute silence. My mother-in-law slumped into her chair, holding her head and sobbing. Leo looked around like a caged animal, and David remained kneeling, his eyes bloodshot, unable to say another word. Alex looked at me. Ava, how do you wish to proceed? I stood up, looked at each of them, and spoke clearly. For 3 years, I tried to save this family. From today on, I am only saving myself. Then I turned and walked away, not looking back. The collapse behind me wasn't my doing. They had dug their own pit, pushed me in, and never expected that I knew how to climb out. As I stepped out of that house, I knew I had just closed the darkest chapter of my life, ready to write a new one with my own strength. The next morning, just as the sun was rising, I received a call from a property management company. A man's voice came through the phone, clear and professional. Miss Miller? This is to confirm we have completed the final paperwork for the property you sold. We will be on site this morning to secure the premises for the new owner. Would you like to be present to witness the handover? I stood by my window, watching the early morning light spill into the quiet street below. After a moment of silence, I replied, I'll be there. Please proceed as planned. I hung up, my heart steady. I felt no joy, no sadness, just the feeling that a heavy door in my life was finally closing, and I was about to witness the people who had tried to steal from me tremble before the truth. When I arrived, a crowd of neighbors had already gathered. Curious onlookers huddled together, whispering a mix of pity and morbid fascination. Is that Brenda's house being foreclosed on? I heard the daughter-in-law sold it right out from under them. My goodness. Just last week, she was bragging that Leo was about to get the title. I stood at a distance, not joining the crowd, just watching. Two uniformed property managers walked up to the front door and affixed a bright red notice to it. The sharp sound of the heavy-duty tape being pulled taut echoed like the end of a play I had been watching for far too long. My mother-in-law, Brenda, was crumpled on the front steps, her face ashen, her trembling hands clawing at the doorframe. She tried to rip the notice off, but one of the men stopped her. "Ma'am, this property is no longer under your family's legal possession. Please don't make this difficult for us." She burst into tears, wailing like a child who'd had their favorite toy snatched away. "No, this is my daughter-in-law's house. She had no right to sell it. She betrayed me. She betrayed this whole family." The neighbors shook their heads. Some looked sympathetic. Others were just enjoying the free drama. Beside her, Leo stood frozen like a statue, his face turning ghostly white as a manager informed him that the family had 3 days to vacate the premises. For him, 3 days was a death sentence. I could hear him stammer. 3 days? But what about my engagement party? My wedding? The manager replied impassively. "Sir, that's not something we can help you with. This house now belongs to the new owner. You should probably find another place to stay." Mia rushed up to the scene. The moment she saw the notice on the door, she covered her face and started sobbing. "Leo, where are we going to live? My mom said she wouldn't let me get married if we didn't have our own house." Leo spun around to face me, his eyes blazing with fury, as if I had personally destroyed his future. "Ava, you did this on purpose. You wanted to stop us from getting married, didn't you?" I just looked at him calmly. "No, I didn't do anything. I just took back what belonged to me." That sentence seemed to be the final blow that made his legs buckle. Mia yanked her hand away from his and turned and walked away without a second glance. In that moment, I knew their wedding was over. David stood off to the side, his head bowed. When he saw me, he walked over, his voice hoarse. "Ava, you didn't have to do this." I looked at him, all softness gone from my eyes. "You should be asking yourself why all of you pushed me to do this." David fell silent. For probably the first time in 3 years, he was truly facing the consequences of siding with his mother. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. Brenda's fainted. I looked over. My mother-in-law had collapsed on the ground, her face a deathly pale. Neighbors rushed to help her. Someone called 911. I stood my ground, not running to her, but not turning away either. I felt no pleasure in her illness, but I no longer felt pain. It was like watching a storm I had long seen forming on the horizon. One of the older neighbors turned to me, her voice soft but pointed. "Ava, you can blame them for their actions, but I know you have a good heart. Justice has a way of finding people. Those who sow the wind will reap the whirlwind. Don't let this weigh you down." I nodded my thanks. My eyes followed the ambulance as it took Brenda away, but my heart felt unburdened. I held no grudge, sought no revenge, but I would not be her savior either. Leo ran after the ambulance, crying hysterically. David stood motionless, looking like a ghost. The family that had once sat around a table and demanded I call them my own was now scattered like a shattered hive, all because of something they thought they were entitled to. As for me, I watched it all from a distance, like a stranger who already knew the script. I was prepared, and I was strong enough now not to be pulled down into their abyss. Justice didn't need me to act. It operated on its own, finding the right people, at the right time, in the right way. And when I walked away from that street, I didn't look back. Because from that moment on, I knew I had truly stepped out of the shadow of my old life. The wreckage they left behind was no longer mine to clean up. In the days following the eviction, the entire neighborhood was treated to a soap opera, with my former in-laws as the stars. One disaster after another befell them, as if fate itself was demanding they pay for the misery they had inflicted on me for 3 years. I stood outside the vortex, watching quietly. No joy, no satisfaction, just a sense of inevitability. The first domino to fall was the fastest. Leo and Mia's engagement officially imploded. It turned out that for their glamorous engagement photo shoot, they had rented everything by the hour: the luxury car, the designer bags, even the crisp white shirt for Leo to pose as a man of means. The photographer's assistant, who had a grudge against Mia, secretly recorded her saying, "Hurry up and take the pictures so we can post them. Maybe if his family thinks we're a big deal, they'll rush to get a house ready for us." The behind-the-scenes clip went viral on local social media. Mia was dragged for being a clout-chasing wannabe, and Leo became a laughingstock for being a mooch who was now exposed. That very day, Mia sent Leo a short, final text. "We're done? I can't marry someone who can't even take care of himself." He called her relentlessly, but she never picked up. The next day, he was blocked. An engagement that had barely begun was over. Before he could even process Mia's departure, Leo was hit by a second disaster. He got into a car accident. He had been driving distractedly. Witnesses said he looked like a zombie, likely still in shock. He veered off the road and hit a guardrail near the Coronado Bridge, breaking his left leg. The doctor said he would be bedridden for at least 2 months. He couldn't work, and there was no one to care for him. His mother was in the hospital, David was struggling, and Mia was gone. Lying in the hospital with his leg in a cast, Leo's face contorted in pain when the doctor gave him the bill. For the first time, he realized there was no sister-in-law to bail him out, no one to pay his medical expenses. He was finally tasting the bitter fruit he had been cultivating for years. As for David, his comeuppance arrived just as swiftly. After the day Alex came to the house, David was called into HR. It turned out the news of his affair, complete with the bank transfers to his mistress, had been leaked by an accountant in the company who had long disliked David's arrogant attitude. His boss was brief. "This company cannot employ individuals who exhibit a lack of moral character. You don't need to come in tomorrow." David stood outside his office building, holding a termination letter, looking completely drained. He called my phone over and over, but I didn't answer. Not out of spite, but because no explanation could change what was already clear. For 3 years, he had looked down on me while living off my money. Now that he had lost his job and suddenly realized my value, it was too late. And Brenda. After being rushed to the hospital, she was diagnosed with a minor stroke. They had caught it in time to save her life, but she was left with partial paralysis. The right side of her body was immobile, her face drooped, and she couldn't lift her right hand. The woman who had once stood in the middle of her house, pointing her finger at me and calling me ungrateful, now lay helpless, able to do little more than slur the name of the person she had once cursed. "Ava, Ava, don't leave me." I stood outside her hospital room, then looked in. I didn't enter, but I didn't turn away. I just took a quiet breath. This wasn't a punishment I had wished on her. It was the consequence of inflicting so much pain on someone who had done nothing wrong. The laws of cause and effect are immutable. The whole family ended up gathered in that hospital room. David, unemployed and hollowed out. Leo in a wheelchair with a cast on his leg, head bowed in defeat. Mia, gone forever. And Brenda, paralyzed and weeping. A family that once saw me as an outsider was now in ruins before each other's eyes. Not because I was cruel, not because I sought revenge, but because everything they had done had come back to them at the right time, in the right place. I looked at them and felt no satisfaction, no pity, only a quiet calm. Because in the end, I understood something profound. There are some battles you don't need to win. You just need to step aside and watch your opponents defeat themselves. 3 years passed so quickly that sometimes I looked at my life with a sense of wonder. From a woman who cowered in her in-law's kitchen, I had become the owner of a small business, living in a bright, peaceful apartment of my own. No more crying in the bathroom. No more listening to people scrutinize my every move. I was living my own life, owing nothing to anyone, and demanding nothing from the past. But one morning, as I was waiting at a red light near the farmer's market, I saw something that made me freeze. A thin man with a stooped back was pushing an old, worn-out wheelchair. In the chair sat an elderly woman, her hands clenched, her face partially slack, her mouth making indistinct sounds. They stopped on the sidewalk, amidst the bustling crowd. I looked closer and recognized them. David and his mother. He was wearing a faded polo shirt, his hands trembling as he adjusted the sun hat on his mother's head. She sat motionless, her body limp like a rag doll, her eyes staring into the distance. Next to the wheelchair was a stack of lottery tickets held together with a rubber band. They were selling lottery tickets. I didn't approach them. I stayed on my side of the street, a ghost in the hurried crowd. All the city sounds faded away. I just looked at the two people who had once sat at a dinner table, pointing their fingers at me, shouting, demanding, and trampling on my dignity. Now they were struggling under the midday sun, clinging to survival. A passerby stopped. "How much are they?" David managed to smile, a sad, weary thing. $2 a ticket, sir. Could you help us out?" His voice was different. The confidence and arrogance were gone, replaced by the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who had weathered too many storms. His mother suddenly looked in my direction. I don't know if she recognized me, but her eyes welled up with tears and her mouth moved. "Ava! Ava!" Her voice was a garbled whisper, like wind through a crack, but I heard it clearly. It wasn't the sound of a command or a criticism. It was the sound of an apology that could never be fully spoken. I walked closer. David looked up and saw me, and he froze. The pride in his eyes was gone, replaced by shame, regret, and defeat. "Ava, I didn't want you to see me like this." I waited. He swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "Ava, help me just this one time. Mom, she's so weak. I'm trying my best, but I can't manage." He bowed his head low, asking for just a little money for her medicine. It was the first time I had ever seen him look so small. I looked at him for a long time. Then I looked at his mother, the woman who had slammed the table, called me ungrateful, and tried to force me to give my house away. Now she couldn't speak, couldn't command, couldn't wield any power at all. All she had left were her trembling eyes, looking at me as if trying to say the two words she never had: "I'm sorry." I let out a soft breath. Not of anger, not of pity, just release. "David, I've already forgiven you." He looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Really, Ava? Then you'll help me?" I smiled, a gentle smile that held a firm boundary. "I forgive you, but I'm not coming back. And I'm not saving anyone anymore. I've already saved myself." David stood motionless, the last of his hope draining from his face. I opened my wallet and gave him some cash. "This is an act of humanity, not an obligation. Do you understand?" He nodded, his lips trembling. "Thank you, Ava." I gently placed a hand on the arm of the wheelchair and nodded a farewell to his mother. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, not out of hatred, but because it was all over. Sometimes, justice isn't about revenge or retribution. Sometimes, it arrives as quietly as the wind, and those who did wrong are the ones who feel its chill the most. I continued on my own path, my heart surprisingly at peace, because, finally, I had set myself free. 3 years later, my life had turned a new page lighter, brighter, and filled with things I once thought I didn't deserve. After the divorce, I moved into a small apartment near Mission Beach. Waking up to the sea breeze, I finally understood what it meant to breathe with my own lungs, not in fear of displeasing someone else. With the capital from the sale of my house, I started a small workshop producing natural, organic cosmetics, a passion of mine since college. At first, it was just me and 2 employees, making everything by hand. But gradually, customers found us, drawn by the quality and authenticity of our products. A year and a half later, I met Ethan. He was the owner of a company that distributed organic goods. We met at a young entrepreneurs conference. I wasn't immediately struck by him. He was quiet, calm, and spoke thoughtfully. But it was that very calmness that disarmed me. He looked at me like a normal woman, no pity, no curiosity, no divorce label. One day, over coffee to discuss a potential collaboration, he asked, "Ava, are you afraid to start over?" I smiled faintly. "No, I'm just afraid of not having the courage to keep going." He looked at me for a long time and then said something I'll never forget. "Ava, a person who knows how to choose themselves is never afraid of losing anyone else." I was silent for a long time after that, not because it hurt, but because I felt truly seen and truly understood. We started as business partners, then became friends, slowly and without pressure. His patience astounded me. Some nights when I worked late, he would stop by the workshop just to ask, "Have you eaten dinner?" Some days when I was exhausted, I'd find a bag of takeout on my doorstep with a simple note: "Remember to take care of yourself first." One evening, he saw me staring out at the ocean and asked, "Are you still afraid to love?" I didn't look at him, just at the calm surface of the water. "No, I'm just more selective now." He laughed, a soft, warm sound. "Then I'll wait." I turned to look at him, offering neither a rejection nor a promise. But my heart felt as light as a cloud. because I knew I had finally stepped out of the darkness. My workshop grew. We hired more young, passionate people, opened a small branch in La Jolla, and, through Ethan's connections, began exporting to Japan. The woman who was once treated like an ATM, who was cornered by an entire family, was now standing proudly on her own 2 feet. One evening, after signing the biggest contract of my career, I sat and reflected on my journey. From a woman backed against a wall to the person I am today, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. A woman is at her strongest not when she marries a good man, not when she has a fancy house, but when she learns to choose herself, to choose to stand up, to choose not to swallow her tears, to choose to let go of what suffocates her, to choose a path where she doesn't need anyone's permission to live her own life. I close this story with a smile. No hatred, no regrets, no looking back. Only peace, the one thing I fought for years to finally find. And I want to ask you, the person reading this, if it were you, would you choose the house or the husband? Or, like me, would you choose yourself?